recording all that time. Perhaps I was not. I'll start over. So we'll talk a little bit about this boat, why I'm building this boat. My dad was a full-blood Norwegian, grew up here in Washington, born in 1925. And it just seems, I don't know what's in our DNA or whatever, it seems like being on the water and boating and all that stuff is just an integral part of us. Grew up on Hood Canal, which is one of the few fjords in the lower 48 here in Washington State. It doesn't have the real high mountains around it like Norway does, but it is basically a fjord. When Dad went off to the war, World War II, he was down in the South Pacific and on an engineering battalion down there building runways and things like that. We dreamed about coming back here and building boats for a living. He sent his money home. My grandfather, rural Sande, when he got done, they came back in 47, they started this boat business. And my uncle, his younger brother, Alan, was also served in World War II in the United States Navy. When they got back, they decided to start this business and they went down to Shelton and they served an apprenticeship under a fellow named Gus Swanson. I heard tell he was a Swede. I don't know. Swedes and Norwegians kind of give each other a bad time for some reason. But anyway, they served an apprenticeship under Gus, learned how to build these cedar strip boats. They went back up, about 11 miles out North Shore Road on the North Shore Hood Canal on property that my grandfather owned. They set up shop and started building these boats. Over the course of 13 years or so, from 47 to 60, they built somewhere around 1,000 boats. 12-foot, 14-foot cedar strip boats. They were a real seaworthy boat. They were a lot of fun. My other grandpa, Grandpa Baldwin, had a 12-footer, I think it was. And we'd pile in that thing and go all up and down the canal when I was a little kid, my brothers and sisters and cousins. And he'd take us out, low tide, we'd go digging for gooey ducks. Of course, I never did. I was too little, but Grandpa, he could dig gooey ducks with the best of them. Hand digging them, And we'd go crabbing, and we just lived off the food that came out of that salt water. We had a very magical time to be alive here in the canal. But Dad and Alan built a lot of boats. They built boats for the Navy. The Navy bought a whole bunch of utility boats. They'd actually make them out of fiberglass over them. Lots of guys that fish out of Westport, out of Nia Bay, all over Puget Sound with these boats for fishing. They were great fishing boats, and of course back then the fishing was amazing. Dad quit building boats about 1960. I think they built a few more Sande Aces, and we'll talk more about the Sande Aces later. They built a few Aces after that, I think, for special order. When fiberglass boats started to get popular, then you didn't have to repaint them every year. There wasn't near as much upkeep. So they quit building boats, and they moved the shop into Belfair and started selling fiberglass boats and working on outboard motors and inboard-outboard motors. Kind of morphed into a whole different deal. Sande Boat Works was pretty well known in the area. Of course, it's long gone now. Dad passed away in 2007. We lived over in Northeast Washington at that time, up close to where my Tamarack Hills property is. In fact, that was Dad's property. So my middle son, Daniel, called one day and said, hey, I made contact with a guy that has built or rebuilt 4 of these Sande Aces, and he's willing to let us use his patterns to try to build an ace or two. And I thought, well, here I am, 65 years old, and I've never built a boat. Just give it a try. And when I was a little kid, we had an 18-foot cabin boat. Dad actually built it for Grandma and Grandpa Baldwin, called it the Mrs. B. And we ended up spending 2 weeks up in Canada in that boat. Dad took Mom and me and my older brother and my older sister. My little sister wasn't born yet, so it was prior to 1963. And we spent a couple weeks up there, going all over Canada, up Princess Louise Inlet. I was little, but boy, I still remember it. It was amazing. It was really fun. We had a little 10-foot pram that my dad had built. Looked a lot like this. Now, I tried to design this boat out of what my little 5-year-old brain could remember about this boat. I don't know how close it is. My brother might be able to remember better. That's where I got the idea to try to build this boat. I thought, if we're going to try to build a Sande Ace, you got to be pretty precise to build one of those. I thought I'd start making my mistakes on a little boat like this. Discovered another thing in the boat building process is how good Engelmann spruce is for boat material. Just happened to have a bunch of nice big Engelmann spruce on that property, and I happened to have time to do the quarter saw. I went up and spoke to a marine wood supplier up in Port Townsend called Eden Saw. They kind of have a hard time getting their hands on Engelmann spruce, so I'm going to go back up and get exact specifications for what they can use. They also have a kiln that they're available to kiln dry people's lumber. So when we get ready to build the Aces, we're going to try to do the frames as much as we can out of Engelmann spruce. And because we have the sawmill, we can cut any spec lumber we want. So I can take the time to quarter saw it, get real nice vertical grain Engleman spruce for all the frames for these boats. The spruce has a really good weight to strength ratio. It's a little bit lighter than Douglas fir, but almost as strong. Let's talk a little bit about Sande Ace. The Sande Ace was a really cool little boat. Now, if you were a young fellow on Hood Canal in the late 50s, you were pretty cool if you had a Sande Ace with a 35 or 40 or 50 horse Merc on it. It was a great little ski boat. It was fast, 40 miles an hour. Well, 1958, 59, 40 miles an hour on the water was pretty doggone fast. And you could tow water skis with it. There's a lot of guys my age and a little older remember those boats and had those boats when they were kids growing up. And if you're interested, there's a website you can look at called thesandeace.com. It's SANDEACE.com. That's a real fun website that talks about the history of that boat. It was a design that was out there. Dad and Uncle Alan took the design and lengthened it. It was a 12-foot boat design actually, and Dad and Uncle Alan lengthened it out a little bit, made a 13-foot boat out of it, which gave it a little more stability and a little better ride. Boy, they were real artists. I mean, some of them had varnished mahogany decks, and oh my gosh, it was really a really neat boat. And they get together, the guys that have these boats get together every summer on Hood Canal and have a gathering and a lunch, and it's kind of a fun thing. Well, if I can learn on this boat, then I've got a couple of little hydroplane boats, so called a mini max, that I want to build with my youngest son, James, because he's got two boys that are just coming into their teenage years, and it might be a whole lot of fun for those boys to have a couple of little hydroplanes to tool around on the water with. I know I had one when I was 12 years old, 1969. What do they say? That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So, hope you enjoyed. Thanks for coming along for the ride. We'll see how it goes. Anyway, thanks for watching.